Hello and welcome to my channel. This is going to be a quick video on how my team uses Confluence to manage business analysis deliverables. In order to talk about how you can use Confluence to be effective as a business analyst, you got to understand what your mission is as a business analyst. This is the mission statement for my specific team. However, much of the verbiage is borrowed from the business analysis body of knowledge, so it's generic enough that it's likely to be true no matter where you are or where you're working in whatever industry or software development methodology. At a high level, our job is really to create clarity around the 6 BA core responsibilities, which are stakeholders, context, needs, solution, change, and value. It's also important to understand that the role of business analyst doesn't exist in small organizations. The need of a business analyst is to try to help understand, analyze, and really boil down that complexity. So when we're making changes to systems or processes, we're not breaking things along the way. So whether you're in waterfall or agile, your job as a business analyst is to reduce risk by facilitating better understanding of all of the moving parts. And so again, if you're in a small shop or a small product with not a lot of connections, and it's a pretty straightforward application with kind of like a single charter, there's a good chance there's not a need for a business analyst, and a lot of the things that I'm talking about may not be necessarily. But if you're working for a large corporation where your product is just one small piece on a much larger puzzle, then these are the types of things that could be valuable to you. I also wanted to touch on where in the Scrum process the types of things that we're going to be doing at Confluence would provide the most value. As a BA, the things that you produce are going to provide the most value essentially in the sprint planning section or portion of the process. This is when you're defining user stories, estimating user stories, refining user stories to make sure they're ready for to be worked on by the development team. This means at this point, you need to understand who the stakeholders are, understand the context, understand the change, understand why it's valuable, etc. And that context portion is a big part of it, that this change is really a small piece of a much larger system. So how does it work with that larger system, and how can we understand how this change will impact that larger system? And then in addition to that, the second point in which the work that we're doing will be valuable is at the end of a sprint, when the work is done and we're essentially ready to push new functionality into production. That means production now is going to be different than it was before the sprint. We need to document that somewhere so that when people want to understand how your system works, there's a place where they could go and do that, especially whenever they're getting ready to do sprint planning again and maybe changing how that system may work. Okay, so let's jump right into it. One of the first things you'll need to do whenever you're in Confluence is create a space. A space is really just where your team is going to be working. So, the level in which the space should exist should be the level in which the team collaborates. So if you're a single team working on a single product, maybe that space will be at a product level. Maybe if you're a release train, or a value stream, so there's a few products who are working together to deliver something, you might do it at that value stream level or release train level. It's really dependent on your team. So if we go here to create a space, so these are the spaces that already exist. If I go here to create a space, and I'm not going to create a new one, I just want to demonstrate some of the things that are available. It gives you some templates. So if you start with a blank space, your space is essentially going to look like this. There's going to be an overview, a couple of shortcuts, and that's it. But Confluence gives you essentially some shortcuts to creating a space that, if you know exactly how your space is going to be used, you could potentially use one of these templates to kind of create some of that structure right away, so you don't have to do it manually. So these are some of the examples. There's quite a few, but choose whatever works best for your team. And if you don't know what that is, start with the blank one and create it yourself. It's important to note that a space is really for your team. So there's a good chance that you may not even be the person creating a new space. It might be the Scrum Master or a dev lead or somebody like that who's creating the space for the first time, and you're just a participant. But remember, your Confluence space is not just for you, it's for your team. It's for the BAs, it's for the developers, it's for the product owner, for QAs, and anybody else who needs to understand what your team is up to and help be productive. So it's a collaborative space, and it's not just for you. So I'm going to close out of this and go to a space that I already created. So if you saw my review on JIRA, or how to use JIRA, you saw that I created a fictional app called the Travel Buddy app. So I created this space to kind of go hand in hand with that Travel Buddy app. You can see here that it has the generic template stuff. This is what the overview page will look like, fresh out of the box. I did not design this page. This is just how it looks, and there's elements that you could remove. But the intent is just really to help you get started in a new space. You can see there's things here that help you keep track of things as a team. But I'm going to focus on kind of the BA deliverables that are important when working in a team space. The first thing you're going to want to be able to do when creating a team space or working in a team space is be able to create a page. This is in the event that the space or the page that you need doesn't already exist. You're going to need to be able to create it. There's a few different ways you can create a page. You can, if you're already in the scope of a space, so you can see I'm already in a space, I can just hit create, and it'll create a page. I don't recommend doing that necessarily because it's going to create a page underneath the page wherever you are. And so if you're not totally clear on where you are in the scope of your space, you might be creating a page somewhere where you didn't intend to. So I prefer to come down to the pages section and kind of look at the structure that's already there and make a decision on where I want my page to exist within the current structure. And we'll talk about the structure a little bit more. And so this is the kind of the top level of the pages. So if I click this, create a page, it's going to make it at the top level and on and on. So I'm going to go ahead and create a page at the top level. This is what it looks like when you hit create a page. There's some templates available if you want some shortcuts. If you already know what you're planning on doing, more than likely you don't need a template, but there are some cool things out there. So it's worth browsing around when you have some free time to see what all is up there, what cool things that you might not be able to or have thought of to create on your own. So we'll go ahead and close that. And so this is what a new page looks like. It's kind of your standard rich text editor type of space. You could give your page a new title and add whatever text you want to the page. There's all kinds of different things that you could do here, very similar to the types of things that you might see in any text editor or Word or something like that, making things bold, headers, colors, bulleted and numbered lists, indenting, all that type of stuff, in addition to things like tables and additional inserts as well. These add-on items, some of them are built into Confluence, some of them are add-ons that you can add. Most of the tools and software that teams use to be productive have a plugin in Confluence. So if you don't see it on the list here, you probably just need to talk to your Confluence administrators to get that plugin added. I added a few plugins that we'll talk about as we move along through, but that's how you create a page. You just hit create page, you input the text that you want, you get your standard rich text editor type stuff here, and then you could add some plugins here, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But now let's dig into the BA stuff. As a BA, as you're moving along your journey into creating clarity around those 6 core concepts, one of the first things you could do to provide value to your team is create a glossary. It's one of the most basic BA deliverables that you can create, and it does potentially create a lot of value in helping a new team member or even existing team members understand how you use different terminology in your application. So you can see I already kind of created a glossary item. If I go to edit here, all I added was your basic table template. When you click table and add it, it adds a table. I think it added it with a header, 3 rows, and 3 columns. And that's kind of where it starts. And then you can add columns from directly in the interface, so you don't have to right click or anything like that. If you need another column, you just click that. If you add one by accident, you can come through here and just remove it. Likewise, in adding additional rows, it's very easy and simple. Just add your terms and you can move right along. There are some shortcut items, menu items as well if you want to do that, but using it kind of like around the table to me is the easiest and most straightforward because it tells you exactly where things are going to end up so you can kind of visualize it. One of the nice things about tables in Confluence is that it's a little bit smarter than your standard table in, say, like a Word document. So here I've included my header row, so it keeps it up at the top. So even as I scroll, you can always see that header row. It allows you to connect to specific data. So if you want to connect to an Excel file or something like that, that's going to be managed outside of this. To update it as it goes, you can do that, but for a glossary, that's unlikely. So first deliverable, glossary. Another nice thing about the glossary is once you've published it and it's available, you can sort by the column. So that means if you were inputting items into this table, not in any particular order or as they were coming to you, you're still able to kind of sort this information so somebody can find the terms that they're looking for a little bit easier and get to what they want. There are some more robust versions of tables where you could even include like filtering and things like that. But at a high level, for your first BA deliverable to implement Confluence, this basic table glossary works just fine. Additional things you can create to provide value for your team is as is documentation around how your application actually works. So these are going to be things like process models, context diagrams, process flows, data flow diagrams, entity relationship diagrams, etc. So being able to create models in Confluence is going to be very important. Again, just like creating a table, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go to a blank process flow page here. I'm going to go here and edit it. And I'm going to go here to add or insert a process flow. And so you can see here, there isn't anything here to create a process flow. So I'm going to click view more. Again, this space is going to be based off of some of the inbuilt capabilities of Confluence as well as plugins that you can add. Many of those plugins are free. So I went through to try to see if I can add some plugins. The ability to add plugins is going to be an admin functionality. So if you're not the admin of your Confluence space, you're not going to be able to do it. So you're going to have to request it. If you're in a fairly mature Confluence space, more than likely there's already some plugins available. I added a couple just as examples. So I added a mind map widget as well as a connection to draw.io, which is free and one of my favorite diagramming tools outside of using a more powerful tool like Visio or Lucidcharts or something like that. So here we can embed a draw.io diagram, meaning if I had already created a diagram and I just want to reference it on this page, I can do that. Or I can create a new, or no, that's something different. Create a new draw.io diagram. There's a bunch of stuff here, and I haven't clicked every single one of these, and not all of them are necessarily relevant to a BA, but diagramming is definitely something that you're going to want to be able to do. So I'm going to go here and click draw.io and click insert. I'm just going to open up draw.io essentially for me to be able to create a diagram. There's lots of different diagrams you can create. Draw.io allows you to pick from some templates if you want to start from something. There's a good chance that whatever template you choose is not going to be a good representation of what you actually need to accomplish. So I tend to start from blank diagrams. However, if you would like to start from something that's not blank, there's a bunch of stuff here to give you ideas on how you could diagram whatever it is that you want to diagram, categorize in a lot of different ways to make it easier for you. You could even create wireframes in draw.io if that's something that you're interested in. So I'm just going to pick a random diagram here, this map. Hit create. And then there you go. It's thrust that into my space for me. We can see the diagram. I would normally start from a blank diagram, but for the sake of this example, and I've also given or created a video on draw.io. So if you want a little bit more details on how to create different draw.io diagrams, you could check that out. So this has been created. I'm not going to modify it too much since it's already here. I'm going to just go ahead and publish it. And then it's here on the page. If I want to include additional information about the different things in this diagram, I can do so right here on the page. You can see flowers, data, mammal, more data. And we publish this. And here it is, here available for anybody to reference. Another important thing that you might want to be able to do as a business analyst is link different pieces of content together. And so here you can see I created a page to relate to some of the stuff that we have on the JIRA board, attendee management, for our travel buddy application. I use just examples. So these aren't real diagrams of anything. This is just like the default templates, as well as some generated text. But let's say this page, attendee management, I want to connect it to a page that somebody else might want to reference without having to make them find it. In this case, like we talked about when creating the JIRA user story, I might to manage attendees, I might want to connect to, a device's Google contacts, right? So if I go here to edit the page, I already created that page for the Google API documentation. And here, that API documentation relates directly to how I manage attendees. So I can go here, I could select the text I want to link it, find that page. So it is Google API documentation. Click it, it's inserted, publish. So now if somebody is, let me refresh that. If somebody's going through my documentation and maybe they're more technical and they're like, oh, well, this process is facilitated by the Google API and that's what I want to work on. Let me go ahead and click that and let it take me right to it. In addition, you could put snippets of code on the page as well. I don't know as a BA if that's something you're going to do, but if you're a more technical BA, it's something that's kind of cool that you could include that might help a developer get their job done a little bit more easier. Now that we've talked at a high level on how you could author different types of information, whether it's tables, just plain text, code, models and diagrams, let's talk about how you should organize the information that you have in your space. It's important to note that how you organize the information should make sense for your team. So you don't necessarily have to organize your Confluence space the way I've organized it here. This is really just to give you ideas on how you might be able to organize your space. You can see that I've done a couple of different things, and I did this to kind of create some examples that you could potentially use for your space. One of my favorite ways to document an application is a functional decomposition, which is really just starting at a high level and breaking it down further and further into different pieces so people can easily navigate the different types of information that are available. They can dig into, find exactly what they need and what they look for. However, that might not necessarily work depending on the nature of your space or the application. If things are super cross-functional, you can see here that I have broken it down from functional, attendee management, etc. And then I've created a separate space for technical with the idea that maybe the technical team might want to use a space separate from mine. However, it doesn't have to be separate. I could have just as easily included this as a subpage of attendee management if that's where it makes more sense. So if a developer is coming in and they want to find it that way, they can come to attendee management and then go down to the different ways attendee management is done or coded or yeah. Likewise, you can organize by deliverable type, which is also something I've seen at my organization. So rather than a functional decomposition, you can say, let me just organize all the different processes so I could find the processes. And you would probably create those processes and potentially link to different things to understand the different pieces of that process or entity relationship diagrams. It all just depends on the nature of your space. So if you're working on a space like an enterprise data warehouse platform or something like that, you're going to be much more data heavy and maybe less functional heavy. Or if you're working on something that's very process heavy, you may be much more process oriented and less data oriented. So it just kind of depends on your space. But these are just some different ways you might organize information in your Confluence space to provide value for all the different people who might be interacting with that information. The last thing I wanted to cover is how a Confluence space and JIRA work kind of hand in hand. So when you're in JIRA, this is the work that's being done. This is how you're organizing and preparing for each individual sprint so you can work together, develop new functionality, etc. And in theory, you're on the move and you're going. And so when you're going through kind of that development process, so if we go back to this diagram here, sprint planning, you're refining those user stories to get them sprint ready. And in fact, if we go back to our team page here, you can see, in our definition of ready, we've recognized any dependencies. The story is estimated and sized appropriately. We understand the technical requirements and implications of the user story, etc. So if we go back to the JIRA board, if we're talking about, okay, now we want to connect to Google Contacts, this is the user story, and we're estimating it and we want to understand how it works, you could come here and as the BA working on the space, you could link to your Confluence page. So you can say, maybe the relevant page is, attendees. So attendee management. So you want whatever developer or QA who's creating test cases to understand at a high level how attendee management works. So as they're working on this story, defining acceptance criteria or whatever, they understand the high level portion. Likewise, I could link the Google API page. for a developer who might need that Google API page. So these are two things that exist in Confluence, not JIRA, but when you're working on this story, whether you're refining it or working on it, there are things there that you might want to reference. And if you click, it opens it up here right away so they could have that. In addition to being able to link it at a user story level, you can actually link Confluence at a project level. So I can link this entire project to that entire space. I already linked it here. So I've linked the Travel Buddy space to the Travel Buddy project in JIRA. And you could navigate the entire Confluence space without leaving JIRA and get everything you need right here. So if you don't remember the link or whatever it is, you can start browsing it right here. It opens the information up right here in the space, so you don't have to jump back and forth, which is very convenient depending on how your team is working. I hope that was a helpful overview on how you can use Confluence as a business analyst to help deliver value to your team, reduce risk, and improve productivity. If you have any additional questions about business analysis in general or Confluence, let me know in the comments, and I'll either answer you there directly or create a whole new video. So subscribe to see your questions get answered, and thanks for watching.